Welcome to part 6 in this series of videos where we look at Blazor WebAssembly from a beginner's perspective. In many applications, it doesn't make sense to allow certain records to be duplicated. To avoid confusing the user, even in this small application, we should prevent countries being duplicated. Later on, we'll also take steps to prevent a city being entered twice for the same country. We'll look at two possible approaches, using the database to prevent duplicates and then code. Let's have a look at the problem. If we run the application and go to Country List and select Add, and I'll try adding France again and click Save, it adds France. So we've now got a duplicate of France. I can go further and edit a record and say change that to Australia and save, and that also creates a duplicate. I'm now just going to change this back so it is in fact unique. So that's the problem, and the question is, how do we solve it? One way, and it's a relatively simple way, is to modify the table definition for the country table in the database. To do this, open DB Browser for SQLite, and then select Open Database and select the Countries and Cities database. This we'll find under the Blazor Countries WASM server data folder. And when it opens, we select country and select modify table. And what we need to do is click this box under U for unique, and that will prevent duplicates being created. So click OK to save it. I'm going to close that, and now we run the application again. Click Countries List. I now try to add a new country, and I'll make it France again. Click Save. It hasn't saved it. So we've still got our original 3 countries there. But notice the problem. If I click Add and France, I click Save, but it gives me no indication that the country hasn't been saved. Now, with just 3 items in the list, that's not a particular problem. But if we had 99 or 200 items in a list, that could be confusing for the user. Now, before I leave this page, I'm going to turn on the developer tools and see what's actually happening. I'm using Microsoft Edge, and to find the developer tools, click the little 3 dots at the top, select More Tools, and then Developer Tools. And up here, I'm going to select Network. So if I try adding a record now, and I'll add a new one, click Save, we get these 2 items appearing here. If I try adding again, and I'll try India again, click Save, notice how we get a status code of 500. And that's telling us that something has gone wrong in the insert, and we'll use that in a little while. So let me close everything here, and we'll go back to the code. So we're preventing duplicates, but we're not telling the user what's happening. And we can perhaps use that 500 code to tell the user that the record hasn't been saved. And to do that, we open the Countries Add Edit page. And what we'd like to do is add a little pop-up screen that says something along the lines, sorry, record cannot be added. To do that, we can use the Sync Fusion predefined dialog box. So in preparation for using that, I'm just going to put the using statement and inject the Syncfusion dialog service. Now we need to make some changes in a number of different places. If we look at country service and the insert, you'll see we're using public async task and then country insert. Now what we can do, if we just hover over this, you'll see that there's an HTTP response message which we're not doing anything with. And we can actually use that to give a message to or detect that there was a problem. And the way we do this is by putting some angle brackets in there and inserting HTTP response message. We also need to change the iCountry service in a minute. But that's telling us we've got a result. We're declaring, rather, a variable called result, and that's waiting for that response. And we can use that response. So if we return the response, we can use that in our message. As I say, we need to change the iCountry service. And here we need this. So now we can go back to the countries add edit, and on the country save, if it's a country ID, if we're inserting, we can check to see what the response is. So instead of that line there, we can see what the response is. So I'm going to replace this code with this. So what we're doing here is we're waiting for the response from the country service country insert, and then we can we can check if result is success status code. We could probably check for the other status codes as well, but there's probably no great advantage in doing that. If we look at the status codes for 500, we'll just see that it says internal error or something along those lines. So if it's successful, we navigate to the country list and that will automatically refresh the list. Otherwise, we're going to open the dialog service saying error, can't insert country. So let's try that. I'll save everything first. I'll try adding France again. And we can't. Can't insert country, error. Unfortunately, the HTTP codes don't tell us what caused the error. It just simply says error. So we can't say it's because we've got a duplicate, although that's actually what it is, but there could be some other reason for the failure, such as a connection to the server breaking down, for example. So that's the error message we can do, and that's as good as we can get. But there's one more problem I discovered at this point, and that is if I spell France with a lowercase f and click save, it does save it. So France with a capital F is different from France with a lowercase f, and the uniqueness in the database is fulfilled. Those two are different. So at this point, I think we'd better look at how we can solve this problem in code, because I think that's going to be the better option. To avoid adding a country that already exists, we will add a check at the point at which the record is about to be saved. But before doing that, I want to make a change to the declaration of country. You'll see that we've got these green squigglies here, and I just want to get rid of those. So if we go back to the definition, and I'll just get rid of the question mark there, which allows the null. I'm going to replace the country save method. But this section here, where we're checking to see if the insert was successful, we can still use that. So we'll be keeping that. So let me replace this with the new code. And what I'm going to do here is, first of all, if we're adding a new record, we're going to check for duplicates. And I'm declaring an integer called duplicates, and that's going to await a new country service called count countries by name. And we'll get onto that in a minute. If the duplicates come back as 0, i.e. there are no duplicates, then we'll proceed to do the insert. And we'll use our existing code to do that. So we're going to await the country service country insert and then check if the result is successful. And if so, we'll navigate back to the country list. Otherwise, we'll let the user know by using the predefined dialog saying unknown error, can't insert country. The one thing we do know is that it isn't due to duplicates. If duplicates are found, so for example, if duplicates comes back as 1, i.e. there's already a country, let's say we're trying to enter a country called Denmark and it says it's already there, we can then warn the user. And I'm using some shorthand here. I'm creating a new string called header saying country already exists, and the warning message, sorry, you can't add this country again, it already exists. And I'm putting that into the dialog service with the warning message first and then the header. To complement this, we now need to define the count countries by name in the country service. So we go to country service and it's a new method, and so I'll just add it to the end here. And it's this. So we're going to create a task that's going to return an integer, which is going to be the number of countries that already exist when we count the number of countries where we're passing in the country name. So again, if I take Denmark as the example, we're going to count the countries called Denmark and await the result, which is this get from JSON async. And the most important thing here is this is called country name, but I'll come on to that a little bit later, and then return the result. So we're passing in the country name into the get from JSON async. This is very similar to the get from JSON async where we're passing in the country ID, but now we're passing in the country name. Perhaps the most important bit here, and that had me puzzled for a long time, is that has got to be a different endpoint to the country by ID. So where we're getting country by ID, we're looking at API/country/ID, and now we're looking for country name, we're looking at API/country name/ and then we're passing in the country name. That item there could be absolutely anything. It doesn't have to be country name, but it does have to be different from country. And I fooled myself to start with because I thought, well, I could just pass country name into API/country. But if you do that, you get an error that says something like ambiguous result. Anyway, having created the new service, we need to complement it by a corresponding entry in iCountry service, which just mirrors what we've got for count countries by name in country service. But the real work is done in country controller. But before I make any changes in here and associated with the confusion I had here and here on API country name as opposed to API country, we've got root here, and then we've got a template saying API/controller, where controller is in square brackets, and that's going to pick up the name of the controller, such as country. And I found this actually a little bit confusing. HTTP GET here will always go to API country, and it's not specifically stated here. So I've decided to rearrange this so that I explicitly state what the actual route. As an example down here, we've got two versions of it. We've got HTTP GET and then country ID, which will be, of course, API/country/country ID. But we can also define the route separately. So I'm going to, first of all, get rid of the partial route out of HTTP GET and specifically state it down here. But I've also decided that I don't like that either, and I'm going to delete this line and specifically put in here the actual route, which will be API/country/country ID. Why do I want to do it this way? Simply because I prefer the explicit definition of the route. I think the other camouflages what is required. So off screen, I'm now going to go through and I'm going to change all these other routes so that we know specifically which route we're going to go to. I've now changed the convention here for dealing with routes. So I've got rid of the statement up at the top saying route API/controller, and I've specifically stated the route for every case. So in the general case, API country, for a specific country ID, API country/country ID with country ID in curly braces. Well, we need a new method for checking for duplicates, and I'm going to add this at the end here. And again, to spare you watching me type it out, I'm going to paste it in. And it's going to be get, and the route is going to be API country name. As I say, that could be anything other than country, and then country name. And it's an async task, and it's going to be count countries by name. And we're passing in the country name. We're defining one parameter, which is the country name, and then the SQL is select, and we're using count brackets asterisk from country. So count everything from country, where country name in uppercase is equal to country name passed in uppercase. And by changing both sides to uppercase, we're getting rid of the problem that somebody may have an uppercase letter for initial letter for France, and another user may have spelt it with lowercase. Then we're creating our usual IDB connection, and we're declaring an integer called duplicates, and it's looking for query first async, and we're getting the result as integer, and we're running the SQL command with the various parameters, and then we're returning the duplicates. And having made those changes, we should be able to run the program and see if it works. So I'll save everything and run it. Here's our countries list as we left it. And we have got France there with an uppercase F and France with a lowercase f. It's not going to check the database retrospectively, so we've got these two entries in there already. However, if I try adding one, we see that we get a message saying country already exists, you can't add it again. If I try spelling it with a lowercase f, I get the same response, and if I try it with an uppercase E at the end, I get the same response. So no matter how we spell it, we can't add France again. And the same goes for India. If I try adding India with a lowercase initial letter, it's not going to allow it. So that seems to work. Now, for my own satisfaction, I'm now going to delete that. And if we try adding France again, it doesn't allow it. But we still haven't closed the loophole to do with editing. So we'll go back to the code and have a look at that. When editing a country, we can use the same technique for checking for duplicates as we use for adding a country, with the exception that we must exclude the record being edited from the duplicate check. In the Countries Add Edit page, we'll call a new service and call it Count Countries by Name and ID, and we will pass to it both the country name and the country ID. If the returned value is 0, no duplicates have been found and the update can take place. If duplicates are found, a SyncFusion predefined dialog is going to be presented to the user, warning them of the duplicate. And to spare you watching me type out the code, I'm going to replace what we've got here with the revised code, which is going to be pretty much a copy of this. So let me just paste that in here. So as you can see, we're counting the duplicates and we're passing to this new service, which is yet to be defined, the country name and the country ID. If duplicates are 0, i.e. there aren't any, then we're going to update the country, and we're going to change that so we get a response code from it, and if it's successful we're going to navigate back to the country list. Otherwise we're going to let the user know that there's an unknown error. That's because we haven't found any duplicates, so therefore it's not a matter of the duplicates being there. So if the duplicates is 1 or more, heaven forbid, then we're going to say country already exists, sorry, it can't be added again, and we'll display the SyncFusion predefined dialog. So we've got a couple of things to do. We'll start off by looking at the country service. And we need a new service similar to Count Countries by Name, called Count Countries by Name and ID. And it follows this almost exactly, except we're now passing into it the country name and the country ID, and we're getting the result, i.e. an integer, how many, from this API country name, and then it's /country name /ID. Again, that's important. The structure of that is important. And then we're returning the result, which will hopefully be 0, but might be 1. We also need to change the country update. So we're passing in the success statement if it has been successful. So let me just change that. So we're making it we're getting it to return the HTTP response message and assigning it to result and then returning the result. And to get those all to work, we now need to turn our attention to iCountry service. In iCountry service, we need to add the new task for the new method. And we need to make country update, we need to give it the response message. But of course, the real work is done in the controller. So back to the controller again. And we've got this HTTP GET for the country name itself, but we need a similar one where we're passing in the country name and the country ID. So let me add that here. And this is very similar to what we've seen before, but the root is API country name, then /country name /country ID. That bit is important. Then we're counting, like I say, it's called count countries by name and ID, and we're passing in the country name and the country ID. And parameters, we've got two this time, the country name and the country ID. And the select is a little bit different. It's saying select count from country, where upper country name equals upper and the parameter, and the country ID does not equal the country ID being passed in of the existing record. And then this bit's exactly the same, where we're returning the duplicates. So I think that should be okay. So if we save it, and we'll give it a run. Right, let's try editing a record. Let's try editing France and changing it into India. And our trap catches it and we can't add it. But we should be able to amend one into something that doesn't already exist. So if I try editing India and I make it, say, USA, it does allow it, but that's permissible. So we've seen in this video how we can prevent duplicates getting either added or edited in the database, which is something that we'll certainly need in a real live application. The code for this and the script for this video, I'll put in, I'll add a link to that in the description, and I'll put a little summary of useful links at the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. In the next video, we'll look at adding cities to these various countries. Thank you. The next one will be along, hopefully shortly.